negotiated, discussed with us, because we could then work towards more effective ward panels.
I know Brent, and I know Brent do that. It was a guidance that we certainly suggested, is that boards should have an invasive interest in the wall panels in their boroughs, because sometimes that wasn't the case, and I think it's important that the boards are able to do so. Sorry, Wendy, then all the message coming in for some questions.
You have to strike a happy medium. There have to be guidelines for the SNBs and for the ward panels, but there also must be flexibility. And that is something that is not reflected in those guidelines, in those terms of reference. If you're going to make something work, if you're going to really try and establish vibrant groups, you have to have local flexibility and also temporal flexibility, because sometimes the groups will be very effective and sometimes they won't be because of the demands of crime.
Sean, did you want to come in? Sorry.
No, I was just hoping to hear from Islington, if that's right. Everyone keeps saying they're from very safe boroughs, and I'm not aware that Islington may have more challenges than that. I'm a Camden councillor, so I know we had a moped epidemic that brought a lot of new people into our ward and safe neighbourhood.
Yeah, I mean, I've been the ward panel chair for 14 years now, since I started. And it's very hard, what you say, trying to get people to come in and stay on. Mm-hmm. It's very, very challenging. I mean, I've got, I'd say, 5 people that we started with, and they still come literally every time we have a meeting. Again, we have one open meeting a year, and it's only the people that have them come when they have problems in their area. As soon as you still deal with the problem, you never see them again. Yeah. Yeah. And no matter how much we try going round, asking them to come back, it's not working. So there has to be something else that we can offer them as wall panels to actually bring them back in. And at the present time, I can't see where that's coming from.
That is. I mean, that's why there's, in an ideal world, you have, and it's brilliant what you do, is that you have groups that are a resident association group or a business group.
I have both.
No, I'm sure you do. And then they are, that group should always be attending. But if you have an individual, that individual might be thinking, well, I had an issue last month, that's kind of gone away, so I won't attend. I think that's the point. What a message you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's the point that you made, David, about crime not being high up on the agenda. On the contrary, I think it's the other way around. Certainly the 3 boroughs that I represent, Hammersmith, Newham, Wick and Bethnal, is crime and more crime. And I think the question we've got to ask is, look, this is not a new debate. We had the same debate around police consultative groups in the 80s, post-com, and representation of the structures, attendance at meetings, do they do anything, are they effective? So it's a debate that's been going on over 4 decades, and we're still at it today. And no doubt there are many hard-working people that I see in East London, but I mean, Tower Hamlets seems to have much more of an active SNB and some ward panels. The rest of East London, I'm hard pushed to think of ward panels actually meeting. Isn't the issue really, I think you touched on, what can we be offering, and particularly the role of the police? How serious do they take these structures? People look at the feeling that the police actually use this to give out information when they want to. I'm speaking very generally here now from my experiences, but what do these structures actually achieve in terms of change? So I would love to look at the debate the other way around. How serious are the police taking these structures? Are they achieving something? And if they're achieving something, then it would be relevant, as you said, Sharon, that, it's about what pen is actually being, forget your words, but you said something about offering something. Yeah. So it was just like your experiences, but I would disagree. I know you qualified remarks by saying that Hammersmith is different maybe, but these structures are more needed than ever before. And is the time come to look at how we liaise with communities afresh? Because the evidence before is that these structures don't really seem to be doing what they were set up to do.
Can I just try? I'm not saying that crime isn't an issue and it's not important, but I think you have to divide it between, if you talk to people on their doorstep or on their flat, on a housing estate, you will get different responses in their relationship to crime. But so crime exists all around, but that step between the existence of crime and the individual then taking a step to be involved at a more formal level is, I think, at the heart of the issue going forward.
I'm going to pursue the point around priorities and promises, or whatever the P word is that the police use at any particular time, and how you're influencing them in the minute. Ty, did you want to comment on the earlier points?
Yeah,
And then, Andrew's coming in.
I was just going to add that Lewisham, even some of the wards that are very safe, they do have very effective ward panels compared to some other that are not too safe. So sometimes the function of a few things like who's chairing it, or the kind of people that just get drawn into it, how committed they are. It's not only just a reflection of how safe the wards are that you get effective wards.
You're right. I think it's very complex. I mean, speaking from a Croydon point of view, I chair my ward panel in a very safe area, and it's quite well populated. You get ward panels in North Croydon where there's some real issues, and it's more challenging to get members. So there's a dichotomy there. Right, I think, Chris, you want to come on that, and then Andrew's coming in, I think.
So preface this by saying, despite our best efforts, I think it's fair to say that Tower Hamlets isn't one of the lowest crime areas in London, but a lot of the challenges outlined by the people we do face as well, and it is hard work. Just wanted to give one recent example of possibly best practice, but certainly success in engaging residents is intended initially as a one-off. We set up a structure or a meeting that would cover initially 3 wards, now covers 4. So they're the 4 in the northwest of Tower Hamlets, stretching around Bethnal Green through to Spitalfields. The idea of this wasn't to set police priorities, it was to help residents, particularly residents' representatives, to navigate all the different agencies involved in crime reduction and enforcement. So I'll give you an example of the way it worked. The last meeting, we had 70 or so people attended for across those wards. We had somebody from the council's substance misuse department talking about their work. We had the council's neighbourhood manager, who's got sort of an oversight of these things for those 4 wards. The police, Tower Hamlets Homes, which is the council's ALMO, their ASB department, talking about what they were doing. We had the mayor came along and talked about the council's priorities in this area, and then we had a resident best practice showcase, an example of where a group of residents of their own initiative were trying to tackle problems in their area. And we're going to be doing those now on a quarterly basis, covering those 4 wards. And the advantage of that level is you can bring in all of those different agencies where they may not be able to attend repeated ward panel meetings. If you've got a group of wards together, they can come in and talk about what they're doing, and residents can start to put together the complicated jigsaw of how these different agencies fit together. So next time we're going to be looking particularly at homelessness and about gangs, and drawing in the right agencies to talk about that. And because people can start to understand where they can best make interventions in their area, the engagement seems to go up.
Okay, that's good. I'm going to bring Carole in on this. It's like chairing 2 committees. This is brilliant. Carole in on this. I've got Andrew, then Sian, and then we'll take it where we... And Len, I've got you, Len, as well. Carole.
Hearing what you've said, we do it in a slightly different way, and I do think you have a body that's not represented here, which is the Neighbourhood Watch. Because the Neighbourhood Watch are at the bottom of this heap, if you want, but they're the most important because they're ears and eyes. And what we do, instead of having like the ward panels meet together, we have Neighbourhood Watch coordinators and members meeting. We have meetings around the borough, and we have Neighbourhood Watch knowledge nights. And we get anything from 20 to 80 turning up. And we've covered things like Operation Venice, which was moped crime, safeguarding, hoarding, scams. And in our borough, we've been really successful in bringing down the rate of people being scammed through scam events that we've had, which culminated in a big one at Twickenham Rugby Stadium with 500 people and so on, and Cressida Dick there and so on. So we do the same as you do, but we do it really with the more grassroots, yeah?
I'm pleased Neighbourhood Watch are involved, because at the early days, often Neighbourhood Watch weren't involved in wall panels, and often, quoting unquoting, they could be seen as the eyes and ears, whereas the panels could be the voice, of putting it at a very simplistic level. Martyn, you're going to come in, and then I'm going to bring...
A very quick one. It all strikes me that engagement structures, which is what, in our case, the PLG is, engaging with the police. I always say to the police, it doesn't matter how many people turn up. What matters is we regularly hold them at a set agenda at a regular interval of time, so we're ready as a structure to receive the next big issue that comes over the horizon. and that's reassuring to the police. In fact, we get around 30 people at a time. And I'm interested in this issue of high crime. Teddington, according to the British insurance industry, has the highest rate of burglary in the UK. In other words, they're challenging the Met figures. That's one of the issues at my PLG. It's an old one. It came up 5 years ago. The insurance companies want to make a few bob. But that is an issue for people. So crime statistics are important.
We're going to get on to, or at some stage, the support wall panels, because ultimately wall panels are, if you want to say they're a creature of the Met, but the expectation is the police will organise the panels and book the halls and get people together. So, but we can pursue that a little bit later. You'll probably shake your head on that, but that is one concept of it. So anyway, right, so I've got Andrew, then Sean.
Well, just on that point, I don't think that's experience that
well, everyone's got different experiences, that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, the point I wanted to get over is who's not here, and that is people from wall panels or SNBs that are failing or not producing very good results. And I think we've got here some good practice and so forth. And it's clear there's quite a disparity. The other thing that occurs to me is how you get people involved. I mean, looking at the panel, no disrespect to you, but you're all white. Where's the BAME representation apart from you over there? And I think that's one of the big challenges in relation to all this. So it comes back to, I think, one or two, I think you were saying, Chris, I mean, how do you get beyond the usual suspects, as it were? And part of the issue is how do you get people aware of your meetings and your activity beyond people already know about you? I mean, how do people actually know you even exist? Because I suspect if I went out in the street, most people wouldn't even know, say, Neighbourhood Board, let alone wall panels, actually existed. So they wouldn't even know to go on a website or something to find out what you're about or what you're doing. So how do you get the wider message out about, A, your existence, and B, how to get engaged with you beyond the usual suspects who know about you in the first place?
Questions? There are 2 points. There's the diversity point, and actually how does your local people know that you're going to meet Monday week or something? Tayo, sorry.
We have a very diverse borough. I can count about 70 different communities or nationalities in Lewisham. We try on the board to make sure that we have very good representation, either from co-opting them. If we think there's a specific group lacking, we just look for who is interested and we co-opt them into the board. But to get the public to know what we're about, we actually proactively, we have a leaflet. We got some money from the Safer Lewisham Partnership for some youth conference, and from there we did a whole lot of leaflets so that we go about different events and distribute leaflets. When we have meetings, we have leaflets there. And I think one thing that actually works is when you engage in what other organizations are doing, it seems to be reciprocal. Because if they're having some events, you go, even if it's for a short while, you can also use that opportunity to do a bit of talk around community safety. And you mentioned the fact that this is your next meeting and this is what they can achieve. So every time that helps to bring different kind of people who ordinarily will not attend. We have websites, we have Twitter, we have Facebook where we promote a lot of our events and what we're about. So every now and then we just go out of our way. And Lewisham does a People's Day that has over 20,000 footfall. We run a stall every People's Day for about 8-10 hours. So give leaflets out, give some freebies, just talk about what we do, get them to talk about what their concerns are. So you might pick one or two few people that haven't heard about it before. And because we set our dates from the beginning of the year, so we could always tell them every Tuesday, 7 to 9 at the Civic Suite, on these dates, we're going to have a meeting. So it helps.
Well, I mean, that's an example of good practice, but it goes back to my original question. What about those that are not succeeding? I mean, your description of how you engage people from wider communities at BME and so forth is very useful, but are you the exception to the rule in the way that you're approaching it? And perhaps some of the others could tell us how they go.
I mean, I think part of this meeting will be helpful because we'll be able to gather evidence of good practice and hopefully in a way share that with other groups that are in need. I know MOPAC colleagues are here, they may take that on
Yeah, but
board.
it comes back to the question I'm putting, are you the exception to the rule in relation to the way people are engaged?
I only know what happened in Lucian and a few other boroughs, but from information at LCP2 level, there are a few boroughs that do have good practices, and there are a few that struggle. Maybe the reason they're not here as well, because sometimes they do not have the time commitment to really go out of the box to make it work, and sometimes they have some other issues they've not been able to address.
It is helpful that LCP2 at a senior level are here because it's part of their responsibilities to support other groups. Wendy, do you want to come in on Andrew's
Very
point?
briefly, yes, LCP2, we could, if MOPAC would help us with the backup accommodation particularly, and other things, LCP2 would be quite happy and quite willing and very well placed to mentor other SNBs and groups simply by sharing experience, but also, which I have done in the past, going to that area and seeing what is there. That's one of the reasons we are here, is to help other boroughs build capacity.
Maybe we had this conversation 6 or 7 years ago when you it's great to hear that aspiration still, Andrew.
But it still does come down to resources. I know in relation to SMBs that I'm involved in my two boroughs, part of the problem is there's no money for publicity. I don't know when you got your money for your leaflets from a different source from what you were saying. And if you don't have the money for publicity, people just don't know your existence, never mind what you're up to. And I think that's a real own goal. It doesn't cost a lot of money to produce a leaflet.
Sometimes it's just gathering the goodwill. We get some sort of indirect donations or funding. We have like a member on the business committee who is a manager at the shopping centre. So sometimes he could drive some promotions or campaign for us to get some things done. If there is a will, you just find a way.
Well, yeah, but in the end, the problem is that if MOPAC are putting restrictions on what you can spend the money on, it becomes a self-perpetuating flaw.
Right, Sean.
My questions were the same, so if anyone's got more to say about active recruitment, that's... Yeah.
I may be...
I've got you, Peter. Sorry, I've got you then. I saw Sean first.
I thought Chris was going to... David was indicate.
No, what I'm saying is I was going to ask the same questions as you, so carry on telling us about your active recruitment efforts.
I may be able to give some insight on the issue of who's not represented here. Is that I previously chaired what was called the Bethnal Green South Ward Panel, and that disappeared along with that local government ward on redrawing the boundaries. Became secretary of the St Peter's ward, but the next door ward, Bethnal Green, went into abeyance. It ceased to function. Nobody was turning up. So I actually chair that at the moment, still on an interim basis, so have yet to escape it again. But it was starting from scratch for a ward panel that had failed. And that first stage was, as Steve said earlier, to map, to go around and have a look at these are the areas, to talk with the ward councillors about who they thought might be interested, to actually do some pounding the streets effectively and trying to engage people. And that has slowly ticked up now, so routinely we'll get 15 to 20 people come along, reasonable geographic distribution. And I think it is actually, a lot of it is just quite hard work, but also talking to the police team themselves, particularly the PCSO. And I have to say that across all the ward panels I've worked in, the support from the Safe Neighbourhoods team has been very strong in terms of room bookings, in terms of encouraging people to come to meetings, sorting out the paperwork, along with the officers. The support has been there. But it is that mapping exercise and talking to stakeholders locally about who might be interested, who do they think might engage, just to get things up and running, and you build from there. But that's the starting point that I'd recommend.
Just a couple of points back to Andrew. At the nub of this is knowledge and communication channels. If you stop people in the street in London and say, do you live in a ward? And they'll say, what's a ward? So you start from the base that everybody around this table understands what a ward panel is, but most people don't. So in communication terms, if you set out and say, we're looking for new members of a ward panel, that's useless communication because people don't understand, A, the concept of a ward, and B, what a ward panel is. So one part of the problem is the actual information content that you put into any communication. The other and bigger part of the problem is what communication channels do you have to the community at large? And I think this is an issue which not only everybody around this table is embracing, but councils are embracing, all public bodies are embracing. How do you get communications out to the community, the diverse community as a whole? And the answer is it's very difficult. I mean, we seem to live in this social, communication, social media age where everybody's twittering away and doing this and that. Well, I mean, I know the police are being pushed into Twitter. If you look at my local police Twitter account, it's followed by more police officers than it is by real people. So there are huge challenges in communication. And maybe it's part of a question going down the track, Steve, but how we and you can better engage with the communities other than, leather walking, knocking on doors and face to face. It's very hard.
Gill and then Carole responding, and then Sean come in, and I've got a couple of others. You're done now, are you? Right, so we've got Gill. I've got your piece, don't worry, you're there.
Just a simple thing, recognising that lots of people don't read websites, etc. Still, we're lacking on the MPS site any mention of a ward panel. So you go onto the Met site, you can put in your own postcode right on the front page, get through to a page which is for your ward, even though you may never have heard of what a ward is. It's something to do when you put in your website, your postcode. Does it say we have ward panels? No. Does it say if you're a member of the community and you want to come to meetings, ward panels take place on this date? No. Or click here to contact your Safer Neighbourhood team so you can go, John. The concept of a ward panel is not even alluded to, let alone how to get there. Now, in the same thing is true with the MOPAC. You had one of, for SNBs, you had action point 3, recommendation 3 in 2015 that you put on this paper to us, which was that, SNBs could have at least a page on the MOPAC website. There isn't anything other than you go to Safer Neighbourhood Boards and it says you can click here to see download PDFs about how to apply for funds and things like that. There is nothing there saying click your borough and here's at least one little page about a Safer Neighbourhood Board. It's got real people on it like you, and you can actually go along and you can be at one of these meetings.
Gill, Carole briefly, then Len and then Peter. I've got Caroline as well. I've got you all, don't worry, you'll get it.
Not only do people not know about PLGs, SNBs, all these initials and things, they don't know about SNTs either. And what we're trying to do in Richmond is do a little publicity campaign with each ward panel and to have posters or banners made, which are quite cheap, but saying come and meet your police. So forgetting about PLGs and Safer Neighbourhood teams and contact sessions, come and meet your police. And then you can pin on the top, meeting today, so if we have the meetings in community centres, church halls, whatever. The other thing we do, because again, we're not perfect, we struggle as well as everybody else to keep all the ward panels going. And when we have a retiring chair, succession is very, very difficult to get someone else to take over. And what we do, because the Safer Neighbourhood Board has to ensure that all wards have a Safer Neighbourhood Ward panel, that's a part of your aims and to us, members of the SNB will chair a meeting in another ward until a new chair is found. And that way we've got a ward panel in every area, except in 2 areas we have 2 working together, and that works, and 2 working together, but they're all functioning.
I'm going to try and regain some structure, and so I've got members queuing up. I've got some members queuing up to ask questions. So I've got Len, Peter, and Caroline. So,
well, first thing, can I just say I'm always in awe of people that give up their time for playing this role, and some of the good practice that you said around the table, and I think that would be echoed by the committee, and we ought to thank you and your colleagues doing it, because I think what's important around this debate is that you're also playing a part that we don't mention much, but we do. I try and bang on about it all the time, particularly with police officers. It's policing by consent, and that's an important principle about policing our communities and about that engagement that people have said. Now, I was very much taken by what you said, Gill, and I just really want to say this, is that much that we all say we value what we're doing and you play an important part in it, isn't issues like that you can't get on the website of either the MPS or the MOPAC website says something about, yeah, we like you, but we're not sure. Because I think they're very simple things to do about the role work that you do. And so, really, I suppose, in your work that you do, and we're going to move on to the next section about making an impact and about your good bits and the bad bits that you do you really believe that you're valued by the institutions you engage with? And I'll talk about some of those institutions. Or do you think it's a bit of an uphill struggle sometimes?
Martyn indicated first, and then I think...
No, I'm interrupting. Peter wanted to speak.
No, if you can answer that direct question, and then Peter's going to possibly another question. I can't speak.
It follows exactly what Len's saying. At this point, in a moment, I'll be asked to leave the room. First of all, it's news to me that in my 9 years, with one exception, the police have never organised a meeting or never done any of that. So to answer your question, value. At times one feels no, particularly on a rainy Sunday afternoon when I'm trying to do all these damned emails to do with policing. The answer is no. I think there should be an evaluation. I'm talking now entirely Hampton, Wick and Teddington, so bear that in mind, please. We don't we have no support from MOPAC and the police directly to us. The police, other than attending the meeting, they've always turned up, I think probably because I would write rude letters to their commanders. Do
you organise the dates and book the
months in advance, and I was coming on to that. We organise our own room, which we get free. We do our own notes, we do our own publicity. We're about to get a grant from our SNP. We now have to do our own stats because the SNT do not provide us with crime stats. That's beginning to run out of hand, back to the insurance issue. I question and ask a question, sorry. Do the police, to be fair to the police, and I'm talking now of constables, PSCOs and sergeants, I'm not talking about inspectors, chief inspectors and higher. Do the police receive frontline training on community engagement, on community awareness? That's a critical question. I don't know the answer to that. I suspect they don't.
You sense they need that training?
Yes, absolutely. You cannot engage the community unless there is an element of understanding and community awareness. You can't do that. We've had some serious examples of where that's fallen over. And that brings me to MOPAC, and forgive me, this is not meant to be rude. I know a lot about MOPAC because I've been doing this for 9, maybe longer. I think I've been doing this since Robert Peel set up the police force. But if I gave up counting. I asked 12 people, both inside the PLG and outside, if they knew of MOPAC and its role. And they didn't. They'd never heard of MOPAC. But however, it's important that citizens know of. However, is it important citizens know about MOPAC? What is important? That it works, that structures are there, the support, the knowledge, the mood music, back to that, of various areas and communities. It overviews the police. So one of the things I've decided since you invited me, Steve, to the chairman, to this meeting, at our next PLG, we're going to have a session on MOPAC, and I will lead it. We're going to have a session on the 2014 Act, and we're also going to have a session on police structures and when and how the police consult and at what level they consult. Is it DAC? Well, most people don't understand the police structures either. So one of my jobs as PL chair is to interpret that, to ensure people do understand.
We understand at the moment there's a joint piece of work, Met and MOPAC, in looking at their engagement, and we are avidly waiting that.
Are we going to be involved in it?
Hang on, we're looking at that, and that's
consistency across in terms of what you're trying to do, because I think there isn't consistency in my boroughs of Greenwich and Lewisham, albeit there's some good practice there, because I think we have different interpretations of that, usually by police officers, of what it is. Should ward councillors be involved in ward panels? Should they not? Oh, I know that they are involved, but in some areas they're excluded. For whatever reason, I don't know why, whether it's local community or local police saying, no, you stay on the outside of that. So what's just a very quick view on that? And then I've got one final question, Chair, about other stakeholders in community safety.
I saw Wendy, please. Off you go.
Right, basically Martyn was talking about the structure in Richmond which predated the ward panels, which was a community construction so that the police were supported and all they had to do was to turn up to a meeting. When the ward panels came in, it was up to the police to book the room, organise minutes, etc., etc. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If new guidelines are to come out, there has to be this flexibility and allow either or, with but to ensure that the police must make some effort to make these ward panels happen, but to relieve them in some ways, to say in some areas the community will do it for you. It's about flexibility.
Chris?
Very short answers. Yes, they should be community-led, but with the full support of the Safe and Haywards team in making them operate. And on councillors, absolutely they should be there. Their overview of the ward they represent is invaluable, particularly where you have areas that aren't represented by residents, businesses, etc. But they should be there in a non-voting capacity. Yep.
There's absolute mixed messages at the beginning when the Met was saying that ward councillors shouldn't be on it, and I certainly pushed back on that, because if you want a group that's representative, there's no one more representative of their ward than a councillor, and it seemed rather odd that that wasn't the case. Carole, briefly, if we're
So I fully endorse that. They should be community-led, with as much help as possible from the police, mainly with identifying premises. Councillors should be there because a lot of crime involves safety, lighting and things like that, and I totally agree with what he's just said.
Because we will be giving feedback on this point made, because, for example, the wall panel that I chair, the room is booked and paid for by the police, the dates are organised by the police through the chair, and their performance managed in my borough, I believe, and held account by their inspector on the number of panels. Now, some of the feedback, the evidence that we're gathering, the feedback that we may be giving to both the Mayor and the Met, may be feedback along the lines that there's an inconsistency, and you may expect us to do. I'm going to move this on. I think I had, who have I got now? Right, Kim, I think it was, and then Kim's going to answer this question, and Len's got one question, and then finally I've been Peter, and apologies, Peter. Kim, did you want to come in on that?
Well, I was just going to say, in our area, it's mostly facilitated by the police.
Right.
Where there's community engagement, then that's great, but sometimes that doesn't happen.
Okay, great. Len, did you want to ask your other
Last
question?
one, and it comes again from contributions you've made. Of course, crime fighting isn't just the prerogative of the police. People in different roles. You're crime fighters in your own right, and adding to that conversation and the debate in reducing crime in our communities. The role of councils and community safety partnerships in reporting information. I'm aware of some Safe Neighbourhood Boards receiving reports from the councils as much as they receive reports from the police. Like for like, is that consistent? Is that a good thing? Do you take the same approach of tough love, critical friends around those issues? Do you think that's valuable, or do you feel you're battling to get the council to participate in the way that you want at Safer Neighbourhood Board levels? I understand councils participating in some ward issues, but what's the consistency of that in that contribution in tackling crime?
In Lewisham, we have very good partnership work. Sometimes there's a bit of struggle because we treat it sometimes like a legal nuisance, but every now and then they realize they actually need us, because when it bubbles in Lewisham, they need community people to help sort or get some messages out. So we part of this partnership team, and they actually scrutinize us as well. We make reports of what we're doing to the partnership team at the meetings. We always have the lead member at our meetings, and we work together a lot. So we have very good engagement practice with the police. Some of the time we don't agree on certain things, but we run through it.
Gill.
In Brent, we have excellent relationships between the council and the police. So we've got the lead member on the board. We've also got the lead officer on the board. But obviously we're not holding the council to account there, but we're sharing them. And the same works with our ward panels in that we work with the leads on partnership to help improve, fill in where there are ward panel gaps, etc. And everything then goes to the joint action groups, say, where as you refer things up, which are a mixture between a housing issue, a council issue, a police issue, we know that they're being moved on and dealt with. I feel very sorry for some of my colleagues who I speak to from time to time in different boroughs who do not have a close relationship with the council. I would like it if MOPAC or somebody could work very hard for them to help them, because they aren't getting the benefits that we're getting.
Kim.
Yeah, we also have a very close relationship with the council and the community safety team, and we actually give the team a slot on our board to report what they're doing, what their priorities are, and so the public can actually hear that too.
Yeah, that's helpful.
And that's the only place that happens.
Peter.
Yeah, some of it's been covered actually, but I was very struck by something you said, David. It seemed to me the glaring thing, which was that people don't know what a ward panel is. They don't even know that they are living in a ward. They certainly don't know the name of the ward. And also something you said, Carole, about Neighbourhood Watch. Now, it seems to me that whatever the pros and cons, Neighbourhood Watch has got the most massive brand recognition. Everyone knows Neighbourhood Watch. They probably even think what you're doing is sort of Neighbourhood Watch, right? So what about, would it help, instead of calling yourself, ward panels, that you actually just had an entirely new name? So that, for example, I'm not being frivolous here, but I'm just bringing out, what if you called it Police Watch, right? Then what you might get is that in those areas that at the moment where you don't get many people along, you might get, for example, people were very concerned about stop and search, because we had stop and search people in recently. They would come along to something called Police Watch as opposed to Neighbourhood Watch. I mean, a completely new branding. How does that go down with you? Does that?
Interesting question. I saw Martyn first. Did you want to respond to that?
Specifically to that. I'm quite relaxed about rebranding because it means a fresh start. That's what you were saying. I'm worried about Police Watch because it's probably my age showing now, because of course in the 70s, where we didn't have these structures prior to Scarman, in the Metropolitan Police Force, we had to challenge the police monitoring groups. So you could call it a police monitoring group. My concern is actually for the police officers themselves. So you, Mr. Kingsford, are here to monitor my performance, and I'm just worried about the breaking down of relationships if you call it watch. I think it's a very sensitive issue, but I think the idea of rebranding, police liaison group for Hampton, Wick and Teddington, I wouldn't dare say how many know, but it's flashed out on the emails, in the magazines, all this kind of stuff, and we get good attendance. But
that's just a suggestion.
But no. I think it's a very sensitive suggestion to think about branding. But you're never going to get neighbours involved in anything we're talking about today until they're broken in.
Tayo, rebranding.
I'm not sure that it's an issue of branding, even though that might help, because it's more of the particular brand we have has not been marketed. There has been no campaign. So if you rebrand it and do exactly the same thing you did with what we have now, it won't change anything. I know there is a bit of, people think Safer Neighbourhood Board doesn't look like what volunteers should come into. It sounds a bit technical, but I don't think that's the main issue. MOPAC has not really made any conscious effort to really say what we're about. When people also do not know about MOPAC, some people don't, unless they're within the safety community. They don't know what's happening. So it has to do with really marketing whatever it is, whether it's what we have now or a different name.
I think you're right there, Ty. Right, sorry, I saw Carole.
This is why one of the reasons we called ours police liaison groups in Richmond, because we liaise with the police. People don't understand what a ward is until it comes time to put a little cross on a voting paper. They live in villages and areas. Neighbourhood Watch know their watch because it's their road, their block of flats, and this is why we're calling these police liaison groups and their police and community from the area. The fact that it happens to be a political ward is almost irrelevant.
I
should be thrown out now, shan't I?
Chris.
No, I would echo that. I think London is fundamentally a collection of villages, and it's those villages that people identify with, not local government boundaries. I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball in, which is probably outside of the remit of this current investigation, but when these were set up, there was almost uniform 3 council awards across all of London. That's no longer the case. That's broken down substantially in a number of boroughs and is likely to continue to do so. That being the case, are local government wards the right boundaries that this policing model should be applied to?
That's a really good point. As part of a borough that's just gone through a ward restructure, the police are behind the curve on that. They're having difficulty getting their heads around what they understood as a 3-member ward has now become possibly 2 wards. So there's an issue there. Right, and now finally Caroline, I do apologise.
No, it's fine. I wanted to understand the link with the council in terms of the admin support, because my understanding was councils are, for the Safer Neighbourhood Board, councils are supposed to help with the administration, the minutes and so on of the Safer Neighbourhood Boards. And a number of you are shaking your heads. Westminster doesn't exist anymore, SNB, because the council decided they wouldn't support it anymore, and MOPAC don't seem to have picked that up. So I'm trying to understand what support there is or isn't for that from the councils. I'd like to know, as we've seen police boroughs merge, has that been a challenge for your Safer Neighbourhood Board meetings, that you find there's lack of capacity at a senior level? Are you getting the right people along? And finally, my third point is MOPAC administer the independent custody volunteers and visitors. How do you link those ICVs and their work into what you're doing in your boroughs, in your SNB meetings?
3 very good specific question. I saw Kim first, I think.
Yes, MOPAC does give us £5,200 a year for admin. In our area, our admin is done by the Kensington Chelsea Social Council, charity, and they do the minutes and all that sort of thing.
Charity do it?
Yes, so we have a charity do it, but that social council, I believe, is run under the council, run by the council. So in a way, the council is doing it. But we do. I mean, all the boards have money to be able to pay somebody to do that. Yeah. The BCU setup, I think this is a real challenge in representations in the Met on our board. I mean, we're not sure exactly who, is supposed to be. I mean, initially it was, the chief inspector is everywhere, it's supposed to, or chief superintendent, there's supposed to be a superintendent. That was the idea for our area. Well, they're too busy doing response and all that, so now we've got a chief inspector, maybe, that's going to be the borough's representative. And so it's not as good, actually, because we don't have the decision makers.
It's like downgraded.
To ask them the right questions. Yeah. And I don't know about ICV, I'll just say that we have a rep on our board that gives a report.
The ICV, we had this at the beginning, the ICV constitution. I think the way we looked at a dotted line for the ICVs, because it's a different constitution. But
they're still volunteers. I wonder how to engage with them.
Right, so Tyler, and then Sharon.
In Lewisham, we have a very strong ICV representation, and every now and then we give an opportunity for him to talk about what they do, bring forms, try to enroll people to join. And almost every year we have an information pack for the AGM. We get a report from ICV to go on that information pack. For our admin, we started up having the voluntary sector to do our admin, but it was like on a wrong footing. It didn't work out. We pulled out halfway through the first year, and from then we do our admin directly. We just get somebody who invoice us and we take control of our administration.
Okay, Gill, and then Sharon.
Yes. So in terms of the admin, we have a similar experience in Brent to Tayo in that we went with some voluntary service, and I don't think when they took minutes they'd been at the same meeting with us. And so we took it back in-house, but we run everything through the council so that all the money that comes for the projects goes through the council system. So they do some admin stuff for us, but not minutes and things. Now, you said about the BCU, we are getting less good attendance in that we started off with our BCU commander who then felt it was too much to go to Barney, Carole and Brent. And the good thing about him was that he could answer questions on any issues. What has happened is they tend to want to send a person who's partnership because they think we're about partnership and linking with the community. But actually, we want to know what CID are doing, we want to know what Response are doing. So there's an issue about whether we're getting somebody who can give us that breadth of feedback. ICV, when SNB started, MOPAC used to give us a data pack before our meetings, and that contained the ICV visitors report. I have to say it wasn't highly enlightening in that it was the same wording time after time. Anyway, now we don't get anything, so nothing comes as a document, whereas we used to have that automatically. And of course we have good representation on ours who gives us feedback, etc. But the general feedback is that everything's going all right, and sometimes they're short of people, and then we just work on the issue of being short of people. We haven't found we've been able to make much difference because we never got a report that was critically pointing to things that could perhaps be improved because it just said things are going generally okay.
Okay, well, I'm going to be sure. While I think about it on data packs for boards and panels, I kind of controversially quite like the idea that panel chairs now, and they couldn't do 5 years ago, actually access and source your own board information. Because I used to find often in the past that the police would bring along figures that kind of suited them. But now, communities, ward panels and boards can actually source right down to your own ward the figures to challenge the police yourselves. And I think that's quite helpful, and that's moved on. Sharon, sorry, kept you waiting, do apologise.
We've got the opposite. The minutes and everything else used to be done by the council. But now it's the money that we get from MOPAC for the admin is now being split between the council and also the voluntary sector. So he's now taking the minutes, but it still has to be okayed by the council to send it out and everything else, and obviously the chair. So it seemed to do a reverse to what what you all started with, because we've only been going for a few years. We haven't been going as long as most of you. I think it's 4 years now in Islington. Yeah. And again, what you were saying about the borough commanders coming to the meetings and everything else, we've had 3 borough commanders in the last 3 years. So we haven't got that consistency either, but we do have the same police officers obviously coming. The other thing is they move the police officers so much, you just get used to them being on and what you're asking them to bring, they're bringing, and then they get moved. Mm-hmm. This is another major problem that we found in Islington, that they just keep moving the police around and round. So you're not getting that consistency with the information that you've asked them for, because they can't rely on the next person doing exactly the same. Because the next person may have entirely a different idea to the information that you actually need, which is what you were saying earlier.
So Carole and Martyn on this point, then Sian's going to come in on another question probably.
I think first of all boroughs are different. We have the venues provided by the council with an agreement we have with them. MOPAC provide us with 5k for the admin support. Yeah. And it's the SNB is run totally by the community. The police always attend. We have had our BCU commander, but she can't go to 4 because we're an amalgamation of 4 boroughs. She comes when she can. If not, we have our superintendent. On the rare occasion when our superintendent can't come, who is also the community engagement for the 4 boroughs, we will have a senior officer. And we find that this works, but every borough is different. And I think the questions you asked, Caroline, should be answered by all the Safer Neighbourhood Boards. We are all different. I don't think you can ever expect us to be be the same, but there must be some good practice there that we can learn from.
I'll bring in Mark. The likelihood is that because it's great that you're here to represent as recommended, but it may well be that we will write out through LCP2 to garner more information along the lines that you said. Right, Martyn, then we're going to a question.
Chairman, I'm going to have to use an example to illustrate what I'm trying to get at. It's important that a ward committee chair, SNB chair, does the homework, understands the shifting sands of government agencies like the police and also the mayor, how they're organised. So spend a lot of time. Sometimes I get caught off guard, and at my last PLG I had not realised or understood that the BCU commander and the superintendent in charge of traffic or what response units had made a decision to move the respond unit from Kingston, Martyn or wherever to Twickenham. Okay, that's a decision he or she has made. They've got to live with it. However, at the meeting, our sergeant took a lot of stick over this, caught me completely off guard, back to the mood music, didn't know, because I've always heard a lot of sirens where I live. It's very comforting. But apparently, in Hampton, Wick and the edge of Teddington, it's becoming a serious issue. Now, I'm getting to the point, there's only one bridge, of course, you've got to go over Kingston to get to the other boroughs. The public didn't know that and didn't understand it. And so the rumble that I'm now coming towards me is, unless I'm going to have to write to the superintendent, is that at the next PLG there could be a big PLG about people being kept awake all night because of one decision. Now, blues and twos, okay, you've got to live with it, but it's the distance of the decision making and the accountability. Our poor sergeant took a lot of stick that night, so I think the communication of how it's been reorganised, not the response, I'm talking about I thought until quite recently by the BCU was Borough Command Unit. It's not, is it? It's basic command unit. And I've done my homework on that. So one superintendent is covering 1 million people. Let's be frank.
I mean, there's issues. I'm going to bring Wendy and then carry on. The issue around borough mergers, which is the point Carole made at the beginning, the increasing flatness of the management structure, so less superintendents to go to community events, which is the point you're making. And I think, before I run out of time, we need to talk later about priorities and promises. What is your expectation from that sergeant? Because perhaps on that, and let me continue. Perhaps on that subject, your expectation of ward panel was higher than the level of officer you had at that meeting. Wendy, briefly. Caroline, do you want to come in further?
No, I was on your list at some point.
Yeah, Wendy and then Charlotte.
Specifically, Caroline, your question about independent custody visitors.
Yeah.
Because we have now these big central custody suites, if you do not have a suite in your borough, you don't get much feedback, and unless the facility is very close to the border, they no longer take custody visitors from your borough. So that experience is very, very different. We have virtually nothing in Richmond. I'm sure Kingston, for example, where this suite is, does.
Okay.
And that is a problem.
Sean, sorry.
I wanted to contribute to the question about data and ask a question, if that's okay. Obviously, I go to my own, I'm a local councillor and I go to my own ward panel, and what I've noticed is, yes, we've got the dashboard where you can get the data, which is like overall numbers for your ward, but what we're presented with now, and this took a few rounds to get sort of 2 dedicated ward officers ago, is the map of the ward we get presented with, along with colour-coded blobs showing us all the crimes that have taken place over the last 3 months. You're all nodding. So that has survived 2 changes, and that was set up under 1 officer. We've had 2 changes of ward officers, and we're still getting the same data. So I wanted to know if that was like consistently now what you're being presented with by officers in your ward panels, and how useful it is, and whether it could be improved, and if you're using the dashboard as well to verify, because I think the dashboard will let you look up more than just the crimes that have happened in your area. You can see if there's any happening nearby, that sort of thing.
Yours, will you first?
Thank you. Yes, issues to do with data going to the ward panel. One thing about maps that sometimes is being said is that it can specify too closely where the crime was and therefore might need to be redacted or might need to be taken back in. If you're in a more sparsely populated area, a blob might be clear whose house the blob was on. What we found is that safer neighbourhood teams spend a lot of time trying to download data, and it can be a bad use of their time, particularly if they're not good at it. So what we've just started to try and do in Brent is to see if we can get a whole lot of central stuff that we can just have at ward level, and I gave it out at a ward chairs meeting a few weeks ago that our inspector ran, so that people could feed back, and it would be simpler because it could come from the centre every 2 months. So we're looking at that. The thing that I don't like is the MPS site where you could click on your own ward, and for my panel I do go through every crime on there, but I have to waste forever to get the crime for the exact month. I have to drag a line along to get the exact month span I want. It's all super flexible. I can have anything I want, but I get one thing at a time. What I want to be able to do is say, give me this time interval, give me these 8 crimes and sub-crimes, and let me click something and have it jump onto a PDF, and I've got it on one page. It takes me ages to take how many burglaries last month in my ward, how many burglaries the month before in my ward. All this is too time consuming, and you're saying, Steve, that we can access it, but you know, how many hours in the day are we spending accessing it? Yeah.
This is the MOPAC dashboard, just to be clear.
This is the MPS.
Yeah.
The MPS ward level data, not the MOPAC, the MPS.
It's the MPS, isn't it? Yeah, that's the one I referred to, actually.
I'm just trying to recall if it's as complicated as that. And that you're saying you can't use the blob maps, which I'm assuming have been made fairly central, because like I said, the new ward officers have started using them without a problem. It's not like they're not complaining, they're spending lots of time on them.
I visit lots of our ward panels, and I visited one 2 weeks ago where the Sarge handed it out. I've been to other ones where the Sarge has been saying, should we or shouldn't we hand this out? So the issue is about redacting and privacy, but the second issue is about time taken by very busy SNT ward officers, and we're trying to get a line across our borough about who will provide what data so that all wards can expect to have equity.
Okay, no, that's interesting. It's just, we do find the blob maps quite useful in terms of looking at clusters. It has triggered in the past an investigation because the cluster was quite clearly there, and they were being treated as individual crimes, and that was raised, and it actually did become an investigation, and that was quite useful. But yeah, does everyone else, your own officers,
Chris has indicated
they're taking a lot of time over these maps?
They're Martyn.
3 brief things. We have used the sort of cluster hotspot maps, and this may be something that's just a feature of a relatively small ward geographically in the area we are, but it tends just to tell us that you get lots of incidents around tube stations and areas of the vibrant nighttime economy. So it probably doesn't actually inform our discussions that much, because it doesn't highlight hotspots in residential areas and those sorts of things. Secondly, I think there is problems with the usability of the data. We were presented with information about violent crime, and ward panel members wanted a breakdown, because that covers everything from very minor incidents up to murder, and we'd like to know which. Getting that information out of the MPS website into a format that's useful to ward panels involved a lot of random copying and pasting. The third thing that's come up as an issue recently is about drug crime. At the moment, as I understand it, something is only recorded as a drug crime if it's been proven that the substance concerned was a narcotic, which means that all the reports of drug crime, which 99% of the time are probably accurate reports of residents witnessing dealing, don't get recorded, which means that residents first turn up and get really frustrated. Why is there only 10 drug crimes recorded in the last month? I've seen more than that and reported more than that personally. But because the police can't prove that that actually was a crime, in the way that if somebody reports a burglary, even if you don't catch the person carrying the TV out the door, it's still recorded as a crime. it means it's very difficult to map drug incidents, and that is causing a real problem. So that is one place where the data falls down and really inhibits the work of ward panels and SNTs.
Martyn?
Just on data, just a thing that keeps popping up every now and again, and I may be, it may be my fault or others, my colleagues not being able to find it, but it would be useful to say we have so many burglaries and so many have been solved. We don't have a percentage of how much crime and how much crime has been solved, and citizens ask that question of me, and I can't give the answer because I don't know where to go.
My next question after David, and Sean's probably going to come in, will be, I want to cover off before we run out of time, priorities and promises, which is kind of linked to that. David?
Just very briefly, just to go back, Sean. We use those blob maps, and I think, whilst they're not complete, they are excellent because they bring to life, the geographic area of the ward. Definition, people don't know the geographic area, and they allow discussion. They kind of bring the data to life. So in that sense, I think they're very good. They need some more refining and they need a bit more work on, but anything that can help get people, that body, to come together and understand what's happening, I think is to the good. So definitely we will support it and encourage it.
Sean?
No, that's
okay, great.
Right, look at the dashboard.
Briefly, and then we're moving on.
There's one kind of data we can't get anymore, which is police complaints data. We used to get data on complaints against police. There was an old site on the MPS, which you would get through an FOI, Freedom of Information page. MOPAC told us how to get into it. When the MPS updated its website, the link was lost. And we couldn't get the complaints data. The other thing is that a major priority London-wide is domestic abuse. And the violence with injury data that you get at ward panel, at borough, at ward level, etc., does not split domestic and non-domestic. So ward panels never manage to really talk about domestic abuse at that lower level, where it might still be discussed at the whole macro level. The data has got to split VWI into domestic and non-domestic at ward level, please.
Can I just check, when did you start getting complaints data? What year was that?
I think it was February 2017 was the last one. You can Google it now and you can get that on the internet. And I just used to get that whole monthly data thing that we could get. It was through an FOI link on the end of the MEP thing.
Thank you.
So when you want to come in, then Andrew wanted to
Yes,
come.
complaints. The trouble is now with this, there's the BCU, they do not organise the complaints by borough. It's done by the 2, 3, 4 boroughs. You cannot. One of the functions of the Safe and Neighbourhood Board is to monitor the complaints. We cannot do this. The borough commanders, I think, are aware of this and have gone back to the centre to see we have to have complaints by borough, not by BCU.
That's helpful. Andrew?
I think it was Martyn was saying you didn't know about the percentage of solved crimes, but certainly last night I was at our SNB in Barnet and we had the burglaries and the percentage of secondary detection rate provided to us. So, and that's come off, presumably the Met website.
It's on the Met site, but not on the MOPAC site.
I mean, it's pretty rubbish. It's 4.2%, which isn't very good. But
it is important to drill down on sanction detection because they are low. Right, okay, I want to move on before I run out of ideas or other questions. I really want to cover, it's been touched upon, particularly ward panel priorities, promises, but also how boards hold to account their cops. I remember going back 4, 5, 6 years when we said that when boards were there to hold the police to account, they didn't like that, which is fine, and there's a row about that. But ultimately I want to understand how you as board chair, hold the local police to account, and also how you as ward panel chairs set priorities and promises for your wards and how you monitor those. Anybody want to? It's about the performance and holding to account piece. I'd like to flesh out a bit. Martyn and Tayo.
Well, we have I said we've been doing this a long time. We have a standard agenda and a standard process The police are first up giving their general overview of the situation. Then we look at the crime stats for each of the 2 wards. It's 2 wards, Teddington and Hampton Wick. And then the public, because it's always a public meeting, can raise any issue they like, provided it's to do with crime and disorder and police and riot.
Specifically in the ward.
Yeah, but they can't raise aircraft noise or whatever, yeah? Things to do with policing is what we're talking about. And those matters of concern are discussed, sometimes quite to the embarrassment of the police, and then we move on to the previous priorities. We don't like the use of the word promise, because I think that priorities, and that's agreed by the PLG, taking into account, and this is where I come in and the sergeant comes in, the borough's priorities, so the 2 mesh together, and then, in a sense, we're continuing the circle of review, and I think that's an important word. We're constantly reviewing what their performance is.
That's kind of the point, I thought, really. Tayo, Chris, then Sharon.
Okay. We have minimum 4 public meetings, so where we use the statistics and upcoming events in the area to ask questions of the police, of the crime reduction unit. The public do the same thing. We also hold at least another 4 strategy meetings where we take in things that need long-term conversation to really drill down and find understanding to what's happening, work with them to get a solution to it. We attend critical incident meetings where we want to find out details of what has happened, where there could be better explanation as to all the press releases that goes out for every, not necessarily homicide, anything that could arouse public interest. We attend all those meetings to find out all those. And we do some other working groups like hate crime. So where we just concentrate on things to do with hate crime and ask questions so that there's different time allocated to really finding out. We attend, from the time we started the BCU, we've been engaging with the performance delivery meetings where all the superintendents come to give overview of what they're doing and difficulties. We attend just to listen.
And you hold them to account in that respect. Sorry, Chris.
So, Standard General take minutes and police stats, the overall crime stats first. To say the minutes of each meeting include a map appended to the back of the ward with all the areas that have been discussed previously highlighted, so everybody has a common understanding of where was being discussed. Most people don't know the whole ward, but also that the police and members of the panel, where an area has been prioritised, have a common understanding of the geography of that and where it's going to be targeted. We'll then receive a report back from the police on the previous set priorities, but also interventions at that point from the other agencies. It might be that council officers or representatives of social landlords or others have got information to feed back as well. We then open it out and it's feedback from residents on those areas as well, but also on any other areas in the ward. We welcome at that point interventions from councillors saying, I've had a lot of issues raised at X estate, Y neighbourhood, and then we'll revisit those priorities, decide whether we think issues in one area have been resolved and that priority should be shut down, or whether other issues have emerged that are more significant. And the final item of the agenda effectively is to agree the public set priorities for the coming period.
Okay, that's helpful. Sharon?
Yeah, I mean, we do our priorities, but I often get phone calls in between the meetings from the police saying that the priorities, could they possibly change them because there's a major problem with a different part of the area to where the priorities were originally left with. We go around the table, as you were saying, about where their problems are and etc. But I often get phone calls from the police saying, look, we cannot go, that problem that you started with the priorities is now gone. We've now got this priority, can I change it? They don't do it themselves, they actually phone myself and they do get hold of the people on the wall panels, and they actually say to them, "Can we change the priorities?" I don't know. Does that happen in?
Is that because they've solved it, or it's a bit too awkward?
They've just seen that the people have moved away. If there's a drug, if they've picked somebody up, then they've nicked the person that's doing the drug dealing, etc.
So they've kind of solved.
So they've solved that bit. So now there's another problem somewhere else where they've probably moved it on somewhere else. Right. But they actually check. I don't know. Does anybody else get that kind of information from the police?
I mean, I speak myself as a ward chair. We set 3 priorities.
Yeah, exactly.
And we expect them to come back in 3 months' time and tell us they've solved them. So we don't, although there's email interchange, we don't expect them to come back and say, well, we've sort of done that one, can we have another one, or something we do. Kim, sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you, Sharon.
The wards that my ward and the other wards around do something very similar, but there's also the Met website where you can go and sort of vote on what you think.
Just looking at that.
Yes, you can sort of vote on what you think the priority should be for your ward, or what you're concerned about. Is it burglary? Is it, I don't know, dog fouling or whatever? You know, and actually in some of the wards, the police are saying, whoa, 4 people over the last 3 months voted for that, maybe we should have, and actually it's not used very, very much. And one person can vote 100 times if they want to. So it's not a very good system.
Your experience. Sorry, yeah. Caroline's got...
Caroline.
Caroline first. Caroline's had a thing with Caroline. Go on, sorry.
Just in terms of, I've been looking up this thing, looking at all panels, we've just been comparing what people are voting on, which is quite insane. But there is a space on the website to promote the wall panels, and it's just not being used. In terms of the priorities, though, apart from your local ones, what input did the wall panels or Safer Neighbourhood Boards have into the borough priorities? That's what I really want to understand, because when we met in Tower Hamlets with wall panels, nobody had any input in, and antisocial behaviour, your drug dealing, was such a big issue, and yet it didn't feature as the borough's priority, and that was, and the borough priorities are set with MOPAC. Just wondering what input you have in on that.
Yeah, the sort of relationship between the ward and board priorities to the borough priorities, I think is fair. Carole, you've been had your hand for a while. Do you want to comment on that point as well?
Yeah, it covers that point. We look at, we have the police stats first from the police, then the police say where they believe the issues are, which might be slightly different to the stats because things have moved on, and then the public, the people at the meeting then say where they believe the issues are, and we have to disregard media reports because one crime in the media, like we had the stabbing at Kew, everybody thinks robbery is a big deal, and it's not. So we have that, and then we decide. But what we do at the Safer Neighbourhood Board is I've done a spreadsheet of all the police liaison groups, all the different headings of what their priorities and promises are, 2 separate sheets, and then look to see what the priorities should be for the borough. And that's worked. We stopped doing it for a while, but we've been asked to bring this back in. And I can say from all the years I've been doing this, which is many, the ward priorities on the whole are the same as the Safer Neighbourhood Board, the borough priorities. But we have done this analysis, and it's worth doing.
Okay, so other colleagues like to comment, please?
Yeah, I think at the moment probably the priorities in different areas of Tower Hamlets, the different agencies involved, are probably fairly well aligned, but that is because the voice on these are so loud, not because they're particularly well coordinated.
Yes.
And I think really it goes back to the point I made very early on. There needs to be a better mapping and a better understanding of how these bits of architecture fit together and how different bodies link together. If the Safe Neighbourhoods Board agrees something, where does it go in terms of the council's tasking of their staff or various other agencies involved? And it's not clear how these things sit together.
Other colleagues wish to comment on that? I think that's a very fair point. On the wall panel, I think there's always been a kind of problem between what the local people are saying in that particular ward, setting priorities for that police team, compared to what the officers are being told to do by their superiors in the morning when they go out. And there's always been since we've been looking at it, there's always been a problem around that. Right, last set of questions really is support from MOPAC and Med. Caroline and I laugh inwardly around that. Please say such a thing. So let's talk about the funding that you get given, not the 5,200 admin funding, but boards are allocated a certain amount of money. Do you want to tell us about how that's been working for you? Has that been productive?
Political support.
And the sort of support you have for that time. Let's talk about your relationship with our comrades in MOPAC and how that's worked and that sort of thing.
Well, we've managed to work reasonably well with MOPAC. It could be better because of their timelines. But from the very first year in Lucian, we've made a decision not to really wait for MOPAC timeline because it doesn't work out well for us.
Right.
The time to get things done is unnecessarily dragged. I could understand the first year when they started, it's a teething process and everybody's trying to get things together. But I expect that after the second, third year, there should be a seamless service. Sometimes it's even getting worse.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because you are in the middle and it's endangering trust with the organizations you've tasked to do stuff for you. Sometimes halfway through, they finish the work, you can't pay them off. Some of them are actually running into trouble.
Right.
Yeah. There's a problem with their accounting procedure that needs to change. They've been working on it. Sometime it will get slightly better, then it goes back to how it was. We've not had it good enough.
Okay.
We've managed to apprehend the problem, so we start very early. Even though MOPAC has not given us clear directions for 2019-20, from December meeting, we've opened our bid. We put a caveat, all things being equal, we might get the same amount we got last year, but you start your bid from first week in December, we close it last.
So you've anticipated it?
Yeah, we've been doing that for the past 3 years so that we can be prepared when they are ready. We've closed the bid from end of January. Right. We've selected, we've shortlisted. We're still waiting for money for last year to finish it up. So I've not been able to submit the upcoming one for them to Peru. So we're having to wait to get things done. That shouldn't have
What
to.
other board feedback around how that relationship is with the funding for the projects? Has that kind of worked? I mean, 3 or 4 years now in the making, so there's been some experience of it. Jill?
I think there's an issue in that the group of staff here who meet to make decisions about projects cannot process 32 boroughs worth on the same day. And we're all asked to put a bid in by a certain time. This year they're bringing it forward so that you could make decisions in time for the new financial year. But the point is, humans cannot sit and process 32 boroughs things on that first date. So they then offer 2 or 3 other dates when their committee meets to choose. And if you get chosen in one of those last meetings, some projects won't work. We keep having projects that are in schools and we keep wanting to run them in the summer term, which is a sensible time to run something that's at the beginning of that financial year. But if you can't be sure it's going to be approved, you can't get the group who's doing it running to get it going. And we're ending up busting a gut. So there needs to be a clearer way that if you set a date and 32 bid, how can you process 32 quickly?
And often there's a kind of logjam because many, unlike Lewisham, many boards will kind of, in essence, wake up to this during the course of spring and summer, then realise they've got a deadline. And that adds work to MOPAC colleagues because all these applications come in kind of thick and fast. Sorry, did you want to come back again on that?
Yeah, that's an understandable problem because when a lot of things come at the same time, it takes time to sort it out. But in the event that you even put it on a lot earlier, you shouldn't be having that problem, but you still do, which is more painful.
Caroline, sorry.
Just looking in the year 18-19, only 23 boroughs actually got funding allocated. So that includes the admin funding. So that means 9 boroughs are clearly not functioning at all or receiving any money for some of these great projects that you're talking about. My concern here from what you're describing is that MOPAC aren't able to administer this and aren't on top of working with you. And I know you're supposed to have a single point of contact within MOPAC who should be a regular contact for you. I'm wondering what that reality is on the ground, what liaison you have with MOPAC. Do you feel you have adequate support? Do they turn up to your meetings? And, you know, what is the basic support you would expect for your Safer Neighbourhood Board?
Sharon, what's first?
Yeah, that's what we found on the on our one, that MOPAC give you a date of when the application forms have got to go in, then all of a sudden they change them like a month before. I mean, our funding was supposed to be done by the 28th of February. They brought it forward to the 14th of February. I don't know if it's the same for everybody in the area. That's when our funding, our applications have to be put in. They're not all done at the same time. So it's very confusing. But again, what you say, we haven't got just one person. People leave, obviously, different jobs, they get promoted and whatever. Yeah. But it's very, very hard to get any information from MOPAC when you request it. It could take them weeks to come back to you, which does not help the SNBs trying to get them projects out there. And I agree, it's getting to a stage where it's getting very difficult to actually fund some of the projects because you can't get the information out. You can't put the information out there too early. If you put it out there before Christmas, people forget about it. Yeah? I don't know if you've had the phone. But that's what we did. We put ours out in December. We got no response.
Yeah. We did.
And now everyone's panicking because they've decided to bring it forward by 2 weeks. So we put it out again in January. Now we've got to look at them before the 14th of February for them to actually go through to the next stage.
Yeah.
Gill?
We had an excellent SPOC for many years from the whole beginning of this setup of SNBs. And that was when you used to have lots of different SPOCs around who weren't within the section of Safer Neighbourhood Board. Yep. And now suddenly we've had a change of SPOC because they're all just shared out between 4 people, I think, something like that. And the SPOC we've got now doesn't even have a telephone number in here. I don't understand why. There's no landline number, there's just a mobile number. Hasn't been to our last meeting. And, you know, hopefully they'll sort of catch up to speed. But it's, you know, from having had what I just want to praise as stunning SPOC, I'm not naming them, but it's easy to find out. Stunning SPOC. That we don't
responsive, you could speak to, did all
book
the
calls
things.
with them, talk through, I'm worried about this project, I don't know what about that, what should I do about this, what about that, my public meeting, this, something, what about the police, that. Unbelievable.
So support for you in your role.
Unbelievable. Calendar phone calls with me, made them at the calendar time, all this kind of thing. Couldn't always come to all meetings, you know, understandable, but heard about it, answered all their action points, sent them in advance for a meeting. Perfect. I mean, really stunning. But it was difficult because those people weren't fully involved, so did have to sometimes say, look, Gill, I'm not that close to SNBs, I need to get away and get back to you, but very professionally did. So that system did work. Now it's all been changed, so they've been brought into a little central team.
So there's 4 of them covering 32 boroughs, 8 boroughs each.
I think that is the correct. I don't want to mislead anybody, but
we need to look at.
It's useful, but it's changed and not for the better.
I mean, from the outset, there wasn't quite hands-on support from officers.
Yes,
they would come to the meetings,
right.
And then I think it was a kind of almost like a risk register. So those boards that were successful under excellent leadership, which there's some here, had a light touch, but those boards that were struggling needed more support. Yeah. The problem we've got today is we've got boards, as Andrew said, we've got boards, successful boards, but there are boards out there that aren't functioning, and what's the support they're getting? I think the point that we need to think about as a group. Okay. Right, I'm getting towards the end of some of my questions. I think what I want to do in a way is go through the whole group and get ideas from you relatively succinctly on what improvements you'd like to see. Carole's straight in there, but I'll just elaborate a bit before you look forth. So really what I'd like you to come to us with is what improvements you'd like to see based on your experiences. If your experiences are more Safe Neighbourhood Boards or ward panels, what would you like to see? Because what we come from this work is ultimately we will consider our output, we will consider whether we write to the Mayor, to MOPAC, and you are a very experienced group of people, what you can Did you want to come in on that?
Because it looks like you're about to wind up the session.
Well, no, this will take some time.
I know. So I think it's better coming now. I was just looking at the recommendations from December 2015.
Yes.
And it says, and the purpose of this session was to hear from you, not for us to dominate. And I can echo Len's observations that people are doing this as volunteers, and it's a thankless task. But it seems that there are still huge areas where we are lacking. I mean, to go as far as saying are these structures fit for purpose to stand, and we're just putting it too strongly. I'm looking for something out from this session, a one-line message that I can put on social media later. But it seems that going back December 2015, Chair, that's what progress has been made. And the rebranding issue that Peter raised, but rebranding itself is not enough if the substance doesn't change. How seriously are you taken? And so on. So it's a very wide-ranging sort of observation I've made, but I thought let me get it in before you all come in with hopefully your one strong point as to what can be done.
There's many strong points.
And particularly, but I think the way that some of the institutions in this building operate, it's better to focus your minds on one thing, and then we can monitor whether that one thing is being implemented. I said this after 2.5 years in this building, so I'll run some things.
Two strong points. One is that I think, I know a lot of boroughs have got their own web pages and they're run by various people, but sustainability and succession is difficult. I would like MOPAC to have a page on their website for each Safer Neighbourhood Board, and then you have an inputter from the borough. Yeah. So you can put on information about your Safer Neighbourhood Board meetings, your police ward panels and your Neighbourhood Watch. Then also what I'd like on the website is examples of the projects that have been done that have been successful, with some idea of the costing, the time and the partners. Now that's been promised for ages from MOPAC. And we did do more than half the boroughs. I did a précis of all the work that was done. And that work is hidden, and it's wonderful if you see what each borough does. And that should be on that website with a little pattern about if you're working on knife crime or safeguarding or whatever, you've got this information of the partners and what it cost and how long it took and what you did.
And that is helpful to other boards to see what...
That would help everybody else.
Because I know it is an issue from experience of some boards actually saying, look, you know, we mean well, we've got this money, but we're not really quite sure what to do with it.
And you might have an idea, but if you can press a button for safeguarding or hoarding or whatever it is and see what other people have done, it can help. And that would make us all more effective.
Chris?
So there's two things. One, coherence and understanding of how these bodies interrelate and relate to other agencies and committees and structures that are working on these issues. And through that, genuine engagement from all the different organisations involved. We've talked mainly about local authorities in this, but in many parts of London, social housing providers have staff working on this and have a big role to play. And secondly is relevance, consideration to how the geographic areas being covered and the matters being discussed are relevant to residents or stakeholders in the area, and completing that feedback loop so they can see if I turn up to the meeting and I say this thing, over the next 2-3 months the following things might happen, and then I'm told actually this is the impact that your contribution made, because that's how you ensure that people continue to stay engaged and contribute.
We have explored to a degree relationships with local authorities, but it will be interesting perhaps when others comment, because I think the support from local authorities differs, and it'd be interesting if other colleagues may want to add that to their suggestions. But Chris, thank you. David?
Steve, thanks. I'm going to throw a slight curveball. I sat in July 2017 in front of all your committee here, who I recognise well. I mean, you were investigating antisocial behaviour. At the end of 2017, you produced what I thought was a very good report on antisocial behaviour with 8 recommendations. I have to say, I'm somewhat sad when I looked at your paperwork for today's meeting. Under the action, what you call an action plan or whatever, it says from October of last year, the committee also requested responses to the following questions on antisocial behaviour. This was to MOPAC. I won't read through the questions to save time. But my point is, there was a piece of work, there were some good recommendations. antisocial behaviour is still at the core of ward panels, of what we do in the community. And I just want to know what is happening. Why are your recommendations not being implemented or taken forward? Because they seem to me to be key to what's needed in London. I just want to say that.
Thank you. Did you want to suggest anything you'd also like to see changed going forward? That you, as others, have had a narrative around the need for improvement in certain areas. Is there any one recommendation you think would be better for engagement within your sphere of influence? I
think I mentioned earlier, engagement. I mean, there's two things to this. One is it's about relationships, and without a shadow of doubt, successful ward panels and safe neighbourhood boards are run by strong and effective chairs. And the relationships with the local police is key. I mean, we've talked about a huge turnover of the police, but building that relationship and being able to work and, in a sense, at a personal level, hold the police to account is very important. And then behind that is the communications. I mean, I think we're still struggling to understand how we can reach out to the community en masse. And that's something I think we need to look at.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to come in? No. Gill.
I would like to know sincerely that MOPAC and the Mayor are behind SNBs and Ward Panels, because we always worry when we see a new public access and engagement strategy whether we're sort of dropping off the list of engagement partners. And we want, I would say then, that centrally the campaign to inform the public more about SNBs and ward panels, if MOPAC and the MPS both started to publicise those more, at that same time we would come out behind on the ground getting some of our less active ward panels going, or our less active SNBs. If you were prepared to say to us, we're thinking of campaigns to raise public awareness about these two kinds of ways of communication, and we're thinking of it for May or whenever we're thinking of it, we can all psych up and absolutely join with you, because we do want the MPS to revise those August 2018 documents that they just produced about ward panels, which were inconsistent with each other, hopeless, and are said not to now be revised for another 4 years. We need a fitness for purpose document, because then we can all go out and try to improve things. And like we said, we want stuff on websites, which I said earlier, and Carole said.
Typically two very strong 16 points. That last point I'll take first, which is about the ward panel direction. We can take that on board particularly, but also, as I say, we understand that the Mayor and MOPAC and the Met are embarking upon reviewing their engagement, and we would have a full expectation that colleagues in boards and ward panels will be part of that, and we will be pursuing that as part, with agreement of the group, of our recommendations.
Thank you.
Kim.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, something we've been talking about for many years, which is trying to share best practice.
Yes.
It's been very difficult to figure out, oh, you're doing that? Oh, gosh, I'd like to, somehow best practice for wards and safer neighborhood needs to be easily shared, and that's not happening right now. And it's not happening with MOPAC. Although we've talked about it in MOPAC meetings, about how we share best practice. It just somehow doesn't. I mean, we're all volunteers, we all have different skills. Some of those skills aren't very good to do certain things that MOPAC wants us to do. I mean, they want us to write a GDPR policy for each of our S&P. It's the last thing that I want to do. I'm going to be focusing on crime and other things.
It is, I mean, GDPR, that's all you probably need as a board chair, but I think it's a lonely world out there, particularly on ward panels. If you're trying to energise a ward panel in a ward where there's not a lot of support, best practice and support will be fantastic.
What should we be doing? And the second thing I had was about BCUs and linking across BCUs. I mean, I must admit, I feel on my safer neighborhood quite isolated, because I look on either side and I look at Hammersmith and Fulham and say, well, I don't know what the hell they're doing with the Safer Neighbourhood Board there. Sorry, David. And I look at Westminster and they don't have one. And they don't have one. And so it's sort of like, well, how do we somehow get together and work with the BCU commander to make our BCU the best in London. That's what I want to do, but it's quite difficult. How do we get oversight of what they're doing in the BCU? I can't do it because I'm only one borough.
You're not the only one. I think there's a common complaint all over London and certainly all over East London. I was doing a crime summit in Parliament yesterday with Brown, with one of our local committee groups, and that point came up. And what I've said is, and it's in the new recorded district, tri-borough arrangements require tri-borough workings. So one of the things some of the assembly members have done, certainly in my side of town, Janet and myself, for instance, we meet our borough commanders together in terms of Tower Hamlets and Hackney, and with Kit Prince and people, that's what I'm doing for Outer East London. So I know we got enough on our plates, but being taken seriously and so on. But it's somehow we got to now look at how SNBs and other structures can work, can actually cooperate or meet or have information.
The Met has sent to, we've had meetings at Scotland Yard with
and you got enough, but
Mark
it's
Simmons and
how that information gets to you, but what's happening in for Kensington, Chelsea, so your other boroughs, so you don't work in isolation. That's a big problem.
I mean, my worry is that 5 years in, or 5 years on, there are still boroughs with malfunctioning boards or no boards. How is the new borough mergers going to help that? If anything, it's going to be more difficult. And I think we need to look at that. Martyn.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, first of all, Chairman, thank you for inviting me. So I decided, not that I'm going to read it out, one of Peel's 9 points that guide, I still hope guide, the Metropolitan Police Force. Sorry, it shows my age. The service has never quite caught on with me. But I hope the MPS are guided by Peel. Part of one of his guiding principles, obliquely or indirectly, is to do with community engagement. And you mentioned it earlier about consensus. And there is, if I may say, and it's not meant to be critical, it's an observation. There is too light a use of the words community engagement. And the engaging of the citizens is critical to urban management. And as we all know, you put a man on the moon or a woman on the moon, but you ain't going to learn how to manage cities. And the biggest rule is that. So I feel that my contribution is coming back to the relationship between the young police officers. They're bound to be young because I'm in my 8th decade, so they're bloody sight younger than me. Between the young police officers and PSAOs that work in our town, Teddington and Hampton, Wick. And I feel that engagement that they do should not be taken for granted any more than our work as volunteers should be taken for granted by those who write the Met's future engagement strategy, which I will read with great delight. I doubt if I'll be consulted on it. I doubt if I'll be asked for a review. But I would make one contribution. You can't do community engagement unless those people, I hate the expression, on the front line, are trained in community awareness, what makes the community tick, how to spot a community, how to understand it. We are not suspects, terrible term, usual suspects. We are not engaged with the police in our lives. The majority of the British public aren't involved with the police. So the police must not take it for granted. So to be fair to the young officers, I think that I'll look to see whether part of that strategy is training PCSOs and PCs. As a slight aside, in Nantes, a city I do know well, the municipal police are trained in community engagement. They're actually trained in it before they go on the street, before they engage with the public. And learn how to do it. So that's critical. And I'd like, at my next, I won't ask the police officers in my ward because it's embarrassing. But I suspect they're not trained. And if MOPAC and the Mayor and the Commissioner want to be serious about their strategy, training.
I mean, that's a point you raised earlier about training, and that's part of. So I'll bring you in on it. Part of our recommendation, the agreement of the group, will potentially be around what training do those officers have around community relations.
Well, I'm familiar to some extent with the French municipal police, because 4 years ago some of us went to Lille to look at how the French municipal police work with a view to making recommendations to our own particular political party, which Lord Stevens was in favour of, but we didn't win the election. But that's a mayoral directive, and in Lille there was a strong mayoral directive to the municipal police about community engagement and to work with community groups and so on. So the framework was actually laid for them. I suspect that that's actually all over France.
Yes,
but it's in Lille.
I did say municipal police, not the national
no,
gendarmerie.
Yeah, no, and I'm talking about municipal police.
The municipal police.
Yes, but that's because it came from the mayor of Lille, and it was a clear directive.
Nantes been doing it for years as part of
and I suspect that's happening all
building
over
their
France.
city.
I'm a great fan of the French municipal police model.
Yeah. There we go. I didn't know that. Right, Sharon, please. Thank you.
Yeah, the board have given me a couple of things.
Good.
Excellent. Before I got
System works, doesn't it?
Phone me and let me know about a couple of things. Does the GLA see the work of the SNBs as a vital community input to policing and crime management?
So that's you're posing a question.
It's a question that
but
they've
based
asked.
on the fact that they probably you think the answer in your experience is probably not. No. Right. I'm reading I'm getting that. We got that bit.
Yeah.
Noted.
Noted. Okay, thank you.
Oh,
there's a load of them on here, but some of them have already been...
Are you sure?
Yeah, there's some of them already been asked.
The gist
it's just about the processing, about the MOPAC money,
right,
which was discussed. Acknowledgement of the increase in workload at the SNBs, whether further admin support could be considered through MOPAC.
Right. You're sensing an increase in your workload?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't know if anybody else is. I presume everybody would be. It is at the present time.
Yeah.
Funding formulas to be increased because the roles of the SNB is as an interrogator and for the community partnerships.
Okay.
Because we get a lot of partners that come on and give their opinions on the SNBs. This is something they've just given me.
No, this is great.
Coming in, so
no, this is brilliant.
a lot of it's already been answered by other people, and the questions have already been asked as well.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, just to echo what Caroline already said, to help with the process, the timeline.
Yeah.
I would say if we're talking about 2018, 2019, we should be good to go, so that it doesn't add additional pressures to things we already doing. For now, MOPAC has not issued out directive as to what's happening 2019-20, and we're already in February. By the time they send it out for people to start working on it, we're already running late.
Yeah.
After 5 years, that shouldn't be.
No.
And just to be a bit more responsive to our needs, because we're just volunteers.
That's right. You are, very much so. Wendy?
Very briefly, yes. Funding for communications and advertising the fact that there are ward panels, safer neighbourhood boards, these things exist. We're not allowed to at the moment, really, and that really should change.
Yes.
Secondly, there was when in the glorious days of 2004 and 2005, we made lots of money, and we're training up our safer neighbourhood teams. There was a very good community engagement packet. I'm sure it's in the back of a drawer somewhere that can be brought out to train all officers. And the last thing is, if you're drawing up guidelines for either the ward panels or the boroughs, structure, but the ability to be flexible. That's important.
Very much. Okay. I think the flexibility is something that we've always supported because it's 32 different boroughs, and I get that completely. Okay. Gill.
Are you thinking of changing the terms of reference of SNBs? Because
they're not our terms of reference, they're MOPAC, but we can make recommendations.
Yes. Well, the issue was they have been stuck in stone for a long time, and we keep raising the silly one about ensuring an SNT exists, and all sorts of new areas. We'd love to be involved in trying to evolve that.
A review will be timely, Jill, that's what you're saying?
Yes.
Of everything. Good. I feel a recommendation coming on with the group.
I think there's a lot.
I'd like to thank you all for coming along, first of all. If there's something you haven't covered, we haven't covered, please write to us. I'd echo everyone's thanks because you're volunteers and you give of your time, and that's absolutely fantastic. So again, thank you. The committee will go away, consider what we've heard, and we will make some recommendations, and we will share those with yourselves. So again, thank you very much, guests. If I can just move on briefly, item 6 can ask the committee to note the progress on the work programme. Date of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 6th of March, but that's the Q&A, right? So 6th of March Q&A. I have no other business. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.